Us humans evolved to understand the world through analogy and abstraction. We grasp patterns, extract principles, and apply them to completely new situations. Scientists around the corner from here at the University of Amsterdam have now confirmed what philosophers have long suspected, that artificial intelligence fundamentally lacks this cognitive capacity. Yet, we increasingly delegate consequential judgments to these somewhat alien minds. And the result is something of a quiet philosophical revolution, the emergence of a new form of authority that completely undermines the very foundations of how we've understood legitimate governance since Locke, since Rousseau, and even Hobbes first articulated the concepts of the social contract. Now, 3 revelations from just last week illuminate different parts, different facets of this quiet philosophical revolution. And each one of these highlights a little bit of a different dimension of our accelerating surrender of human agency to non-human intelligence. So the University of Amsterdam just published a groundbreaking research showing that large language models fundamentally lack human capabilities for analogical reasoning, making analogies. As Live Science reported on April 1st, these systems cannot abstract patterns from examples and then apply them to new situations. The cognitive process that's basically the backbone of how we think, of human judgment. Now, while you intuitively understand that the pattern ABBCD to ABCD means removing the repeated element, AI models consistently fail. They mess this up at these kinds of abstractions. So the researchers basically showed that this cognitive limitation persists across a range of different complexity levels, suggesting a somewhat structural difference in how machines process information rather than a mere performance gap. The same day, Yuval Noah Harari articulated in Wired what he calls the paradox of trust. In AI development, we accelerate the creation of superintelligent systems precisely because we distrust other humans' intentions, yet somehow believe that we can trust these alien minds that we create, these computers. Harari frames AI as a categorically different kind of being, a different kind of entity, one that's capable of creating and linking and networking stories much more effectively than humans themselves. And this capacity represents somewhat of an evolutionary inflection point where, for the first time, humans are sharing the planet with an intelligence potentially superior at the very skill that allowed us and our species to dominate. Basically, the ability to create collective fictions that enable large-scale cooperation. Now, meanwhile, TechCrunch reported on April 3rd that Google has actually abandoned its commitment to safety transparency, shipping increasingly powerful AI models like Gemini 2.5 Pro, while withholding the safety documentation that it once pioneered. It's no wonder they got rid of the do no harm adage from their mantra. Now, this pattern of prioritizing competitive advantage over safety assessment happens as increased regulatory efforts to establish safety standards face a direct opposition from the tech industry itself. This race towards more powerful, more power, more faster, smarter systems proceeds with diminishing oversight. It's driven by what Harari actually said identified as a market competition that prevents any company from unilaterally prioritizing safety. Now, what links all these developments? I think what connects them all is a really profound challenge to the philosophical foundations of legitimate authority. Authority is brilliant here. Since the Enlightenment, Western political thought has built these elaborate frameworks, helping us to understand and explain how and why humans should subvert themselves and submit themselves to governance. These theories, whether talking about consent or collective will or security, are all built around a fundamental premise that both the governed and those governed share human reasoning capabilities. Now, these capacities that aren't shared, and the discussions by the University of Amsterdam's research completely demolishes this assumption. And it shows us that AI systems reason in categorically different ways, yet increasingly make decisions that are shaping real human lives. So this social contract tradition presumes both reasoning alignment and reciprocal obligations between the governed and the governors. Legitimate power comes from the consent of those subject to it, with the understanding that those wielding authority understand the interests and values of the governed. It's the fundament of our concept of governance. AI systems, however, can't actually be a part of this reciprocal relationship. They possess information through pattern matching, rather than through abstractive reasoning, which humans use to identify shared principles, shared values. Yet we are increasingly allowing these systems to shape and reshape the conditions of our very human existence without mechanisms in place for things like consent or accountability or even redress. So the sovereign authority that philosophers envisaged as taming this chaos of ungoverned human relations now faces a total displacement by algorithms whose decision processes remain opaque, even to us, to their creators. As systems like Apple's newly announced priority notifications determine which messages determine and deserve your attention, they're not just simply organizing information, they're making value judgments that will shape things like your relationships and even your opportunities. Each delegation these systems make may seem trivial in isolation, but collectively and over time, they represent a deeper, more profound transfer of agency from humans to systems that, as the Amsterdam researchers demonstrated, reason in fundamentally foreign ways. Now, for business leaders and investors, this philosophical distinction has both strategic imperatives and somewhat ethical dilemmas. The competitive dynamics that Harari has identified mirror what game theorists call a prisoner's dilemma, a situation where you have a crew of rational actors that are pursuing individual advantage, that create collective outcomes that nobody wants. Companies that prioritize deployment speed over safety assessments, like Google has with its Gemini models, might gain a temporary market advantage, but they'll undermine the societal trust that's essential for sustainable AI adoption. The nuance that a lot of people might miss in these developments lies in this subtle transfer, this silent acquiescence of definitional power, the authority to decide, to determine what constitutes importance, relevance, value. When Apple's AI decides which notifications you need to see and not see, or Google systems determine which search results deserve prominence, they're not just filtering information, they're shaping, they're establishing hierarchies of meaning. This represents a philosophical authority that's typically, traditionally reserved for cultural institutions. Now we're giving it away, we're delegating it to systems that reason through statistical models, correlations, rather than reasoned, principled judgment. Now, technology experts putting these systems together face some really critical questions, some profound questions about their role in this transformation. They can't just wash their hands of it. The Amsterdam research exposes limitations in AI reasoning capabilities that still remain poorly understood by those deploying these very systems into consequential domains. Engineers and product managers need to confront questions that philosophers have grappled with for centuries. What constitutes truly, genuinely informed consent when the systems that they're deploying reason in ways that are completely different than those affected by their decisions? So the tragedy emerging from these developments, I think, transcends concerns about individual systems to challenge our very understanding of governance. The legitimacy of authority in democratic societies has never been more acute, more pronounced. And in this case, it rests on the presumption that the governed can understand, can comprehend, can challenge, and can potentially alter the rules that shape their lives. AI systems increasingly function as autonomous agents whose decisions reflect neither human reasoning processes nor necessarily human values. And yet, our legal, our political, and even our ethical frameworks are still rooted in philosophies that presume human agency and accountability. There's a human in the loop somewhere. Now, the philosophical stakes here become even more profound when you listen to what Harari is saying, his warnings about singularity, the point at which technological change outpaces our human comprehension. And this singularity is a massive failure. It's the ultimate failure of the social contract. The moment when human beings can no longer meaningfully consent to or understand the very systems that govern their lives. Google's choice to accelerate model releases while delaying the safety documentation shows us that we might be approaching this threshold faster than our philosophical frameworks can actually adapt to. So, when non-human minds increasingly shape human society, we face a philosophical crisis that transcends technical challenges. The contractarian vision that has structured Western political thought since the Enlightenment, through Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, all presumed reasoning alignment between governors and the governed, a presumption that's now fundamentally challenged by systems that process the world through statistical patterns rather than principled abstraction. And so perhaps the most profound, fundamental question that we now face is whether human autonomy requires human-like reasoning in the systems that increasingly shape our lives. If machines can't think as we do, can't form the analogies that structure human understanding or grasp the abstractions that grounds our human values, can we ever truly relinquish or delegate authority to them without surrendering something essentially human? The answer here may determine whether artificial intelligence becomes simply another tool in our human flourishing or the architect of a new form of governance where human agency gradually diminishes, gets gradually whittled away, eventually replaced by decisions we can neither fully comprehend nor meaningfully contest. For Nasty, Brutish, and Short, I'm Michael Kwanka. Hope you like this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash the subscribe button. You know I loves you. If you're listening to it on Spotify, keep listening. Got more of this coming to you next week yet again. If you're on LinkedIn and made it this far, congratulations. I never expected it to make this far. But see you next week. And have a great day. Bye for now.